The desert air is still tonight, warm, dry, and humming with a kind of invisible calm. You walk along a narrow stone path etched into the earth centuries ago, winding between whitewashed walls that glow softly under moonlight. Somewhere nearby, a water clock ticks gently in the courtyard of a scholar. You can almost hear it inhale between each drip. There's a breeze, just enough to carry the scent of something floral, rose, maybe, or saffron. It weaves its way between rooftops and rippling silk curtains. You pause, unsure where it's coming from, but not inclined to chase it. It will find you again, as all things scented tend to do in this city. Welcome to ancient Persia. You're not dreaming, though you might as well be. In a time before plumbing, soap bars, or lemony body wash, you find yourself surrounded by a civilization so fond of scent they perfume their clothes, hair, tents, scrolls, and yes, even their walls. You'll smell like a garden before anyone asks what your name is. Just one cheeky warning. You probably won't make it through this day. Not because of danger, but because halfway through you'll be so relaxed and glazed in imaginary sandalwood that sleep will come creeping in like a cat to your windowsill. If you enjoy these quiet journeys into the past, do consider liking and subscribing softly, gently, perhaps even while wrapped in a blanket. And if you feel moved, drop a comment with your location and local time. We love knowing which corners of the world are dozing together. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. The sun is beginning to rise over the city of Susa. You can already see the muted pinks and golds spreading across the domes and towers like someone brushed them on with a sleepy hand. You pass a fruit seller arranging figs and pomegranates beneath a woven awning, and he barely nods. Everyone moves slowly in the early light here, as if afraid to break the spell of night too suddenly. You step into a shaded walkway lined with cypress trees. Their fragrance is dry and resinous, a sharp contrast to the rose oil lingering in the folds of your tunic. That scent comes from a dab you received earlier from a servant in a perfumed house, who insisted it would wake the spirit without agitating the body. You didn't argue. It was early. You were sleepy. The body remained unagitated. Your sandals make almost no sound on the worn tiles beneath your feet. You catch glimpses of daily life beginning, an old woman sweeping sand from her threshold with a broom made of palm fiber, a boy chasing a very stubborn goose who has absolutely no interest in returning to its pen. There's laughter, but only the kind that floats low, like smoke. Here's something not everyone knows. While other civilizations leaned on soap, ancient Persians relied on scent and ritual. Bathing was important, yes, but not always accessible or daily. Instead, they mastered the art of fragrance, turning it into a kind of spiritual hygiene. Cleanliness, after all, wasn't only about water. It was about balance, temperance, harmony between body and soul. And sometimes, all it took was a few drops of attar dabbed behind the ears. Historians still debate whether certain nobles owned entire wardrobes of scents, each chosen for specific moods, occasions, or planetary alignments. But walk through this street and no one's checking your astrology chart. They're too busy trying to smell nicer than their neighbor. You arrive at a sunken courtyard, quiet and shaded by trellised vines. A fountain trickles lazily in the center. You sit, you breathe. In. And for a moment, time smells like crushed petals and sun-warmed stone. A servant appears, almost noiselessly, bearing a small clay dish with something smoldering in it. Incense, of course oud, if your nose isn't mistaken. It's dark, earthy, and sweet, like a forest that's had secrets whispered to it for centuries. The smoke curls upward, slow and ribboned, blending with the morning air. You feel your shoulders relax, which is impressive considering they've barely been working. In this part of Persia, incense isn't just about fragrance. It's about purification, storytelling, even diplomacy. Scent can welcome a guest or banish a bad mood. You watch the servant disappear behind a curtain, leaving only fragrance behind. That's how many people here prefer to enter a room like a pleasant rumor. You rise again and continue your quiet exploration. The city has woken up a little more now, but it still feels like a whispered conversation between buildings. You pass by a group of women seated near a mosaic-tiled pool, combing oil through their hair with ivory combs. They laugh gently, the way wind plays with bells, and every so often a small copper pot is passed around filled with crushed myrtle and pomegranate skin. It's not a snack. It's a hair treatment. One of them catches your eye and gestures toward a bowl of rose petals soaking in honeyed water. You take a curious sniff. It's cooling, delicate, and just a bit sticky. Apparently, it's meant to be dabbed under the eyes to calm the blood. Whether it works is debatable. Whether it smells divine is undeniable. You pause at a tiled wall where something unexpected has been painted, a poem. A short verse written in old Persian script, praising the virtues of silence, good company, and skin that smells like jasmine at dusk. You don't need to be fluent to understand the point. Here's a detail you probably didn't expect. Some nobles carried scented silk handkerchiefs tucked into their robes, not for sneezing, but for polite inhaling during awkward social moments. Feeling overwhelmed by a political debate? Press your nose to a cloved square of linen and breathe like nothing is wrong. Scholars still wonder how extensive these scented habits were among the lower classes. Were fragrant oils and incense part of daily life for everyone, or just the elite? We may never know. But even in the quietest alleyways, you'll catch the trace of rose water rising from a doorway or see herbs drying on the windowsill of someone who can't afford perfume, but still knows the value of smell. You turn the corner and find yourself at the steps of a perfumer's shop. Not a flashy storefront, just a shaded alcove behind gauzy curtains. Inside, rows of glass flasks, copper tools, and bundles of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling. The air is thick with layers, rose, amber, vinegar, and something musky and unfamiliar. The perfumer greets you with a nod and offers a poundful of resin to chew. You politely decline, having learned your lesson yesterday when you mistook spikenard for candy. It was not candy, not even close. Instead, you lean over a tray of crushed petals and oils, watching as he slowly pours a viscous liquid into a clou. Carved flask. For a merchant's wedding, he murmurs. She asked to smell like rain over dates. You want to ask how he's going to bottle that, but you stay silent. Better to let the mystery work. You step back into the sun, and again. The scent follows you, of course it does. Here, even the air wants to leave an impression. You walk now through a narrower street, where tall clay walls trap the scent like secrets whispered into cupped hands. There's something in the air, sandalwood, maybe, or dried orange peel toasted in oil. Someone nearby has recently opened a window. You can hear the quiet clink of pottery, and something sizzling softly. It's a kitchen, of course, and the food smells as fragrant as the perfume. This is no accident. In ancient Persia, the line between scent for eating and scent for wearing was blurry, to say the least. If you could cook with it, you could probably bathe in it. If you could anoint your skin with it, you could probably drizzle it over rice. Aromatic democracy. A boy walks past you carrying a small tray with 3 covered bowls. Steam trails behind him like a curious ghost. One bowl, if you had to guess, contained saffron rice. Another, maybe lentils with cinnamon. And the third. It smells like rosewater syrup. You follow him discreetly because, yes, this is a sleepy history story, but even sleepy people follow good smells. He turns into a garden where low tables have been arranged under date palms, and the woman in a jeweled headscarf is greeting guests with a spritz of orange blossom water from a silver sprayer. You don't sit. You hover at the edges, like an accidental poet. Here's something peculiar. Elite Persians used scented smoke not just to mask body odor, but to enhance conversation. Yes, you heard that right. Conversations were expected to flow more smoothly in rooms perfumed with civet or saffron. Vapor. Though frankly, if someone blew civet smoke at you today, you might flow right out the door. Historians still debate whether this was entirely symbolic, or if they actually believed certain scents made you smarter. Either way, you admire the optimism. You turn toward a courtyard where 3 musicians play soft instruments, one with a framed drum, another with a harp, and the third with a flute carved from bone. Their music floats gently above the garden, weaving through the trees like another kind of perfume. One you can hear. The perfumed air, the music, the low murmurs of guests. It's all carefully designed to lull, to warm, to soften the sharpness of the day. You're beginning to see the theme here. In this city, pleasure isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It settles into your skin like rose oil on warm wrists. You lean against a fig tree, close your eyes just for a moment, and wake up when a gooey blossom lands in your lap. The day continues. The sun has risen higher now, and the light has gone from sleepy peach to a sharp golden white that glints off domed rooftops and copper bowls. You find yourself in the central marketplace, a sprawling patchwork of stalls and shade awnings. But there's no shouting here, no hawking of wares. Even the haggling is soft-spoken, like everyone knows that volume scares away good fortune. You pass stalls filled with textiles, bolts of silk dyed in soft purples and greens, all faintly scented with cedar to ward off insects. A woman nearby is folding robes into a basket lined with dried lavender and old newspaper poems. Yes, the poetry is there to absorb scent. And no, she's not taking questions. You move slowly, lazily, through rows of spices and herbs, mountains of crushed petals, mounds of cardamom, rows of frankincense resin in translucent amber nuggets. You stop at a stall where a man is roasting dried rose hips over a small clay burner. He offers you a pinch, motioning toward your face. You nod, and he waves the perfumed smoke toward your hair as if blessing you with a better day. You feel oddly comforted. Also slightly like a very sleepy roast chicken. Here's a detail that's almost too poetic to be true. Some nobles in ancient Persia would sprinkle their letters with powdered ambergris or rose pollen before sealing them. A message that smelled sweet was considered more sincere. You think about the last email you sent. No perfume. Just plain text and passive-aggressive punctuation. Scholars still wonder how widespread this scented correspondence custom really was, but a few excavated scrolls have indeed retained traces of fragrance. It's one thing to find ancient ink. It's another to open a 2,000-year-old letter and say, "Is that ... lavender?" You wander past a spice merchant who is now using a feather fan to waft scent from his jars toward potential buyers. A brilliant strategy. Really no need for shouting when the cardamom speaks for itself. At the edge of the market, you find a stall selling small carved scent cones concentrated. Incense meant to be placed on the crown of the head during meditations or rituals. One cone is shaped like a pomegranate. Another looks suspiciously like a cat. You buy neither, but you lean in and breathe deeply. A child nearby sees you and does the same. Then immediately sneezes. Then laughs. You both carry on. You stop beside a tiled fountain, scooping a little water into your palms and touching it to the back of your neck. The air is dry, but the stone is cool. You sit on the edge, watching people pass robed, bejeweled, wrapped in layers of fine linen, each one exuding some trace of scent: myrrh, camphor, baked date. Even leather has its own poetry here. And as you sit there, you realize, in this world, to be fragrant isn't frivolous. It's a language, a shield, a mirror, a calling card. It's memory made wearable. You rise again, and the scent of rose follows you like a polite shadow. You head now toward the upper terrace district, where the wealthier homes perch along winding lanes like sleepy cats sunbathing on rooftops. The streets here are quieter, shaded by jasmine-covered trellises that drape like old lace across wooden balconies. Every so often, petals fall into your path without explanation, like the city is gently approving your presence. One of the doors. A head opens, not loudly, not urgently, but with the casual hush of a house accustomed to leisure. A servant steps out, holding a wide, shallow dish filled with dried flowers and crushed spices. She scatters the mixture onto the steps, then sweeps it softly with a feathered brush. You're not entirely sure if this is cleansing, offering, or both. But the scent that follows nutmeg and violet is enough to make you reconsider your fast-paced modern life. Just across from this home, a fountain trickles beneath a fig tree. Two elderly men sit beside it on woven mats, playing a slow game of backgammon. Neither of them is winning. Neither seems to care. One of them pauses only to dab oil onto his wrists from a small glass vial, then offers it to his friend, who sniffs. It shrugs and says something like, "Too lemony." In ancient Persian high society, scented oils were almost as important as clothing, sometimes more. Guests might arrive with tiny vials fastened to their belts or even hidden inside rings. Weddings involved entire chambers filled with perfume smoke. Births were marked by anointing the newborn with saffron oil, yes, saffron, the world's most expensive spice. Leave it to humans to immediately make babies smell like high-end rice. Historians still question just how common these practices were beyond the elite, whether the middle classes imitated them, or simply admired from a respectfully unscented distance. You pass by an arched gateway, where someone has painted delicate stars across the ceiling with what smells suspiciously like clove paste. There's no sign, no explanation, just a narrow stairwell beyond. Of course, you follow a dot at the top as a garden terrace, where sunlight filters through latticework and the air carries a whisper of basil and baked fig. A cat sleeps on a cushion beside a tray of tiny glasses, each one filled with something differently colored and vaguely fragrant. You sip one at random: licorice, rose, and something bitter that might be wisdom in liquid form. Below, the city murmurs. But up here, everything holds still. From the terrace, you can see the palace dome shimmering faintly in the late morning sun. Not because it's made of gold, but because everything here shimmers. Heat, scent, even time. A little. You descend slowly, back down the steps into a quieter lane one, where the scent shifts again. This time it's sharper, more resinous. Frankincense, maybe, or mastic gum. It leaks out from an arched doorway, partially covered by a curtain of knotted beads. You pause. Inside is a small Zoroastrian fire temple. You recognize it by the fire that burns at its center, not roaring, but steady, like a candle that never tires. No incense is added here for fun. It's sacred. A bridge between physical and spiritual purity. You step in softly, unsure if you're allowed. No one stops you. A priest in a white robe kneels before the flame, his movements as gentle as silk slipping through water. The scent is subtle dry herbs and ash, but it lingers in a way that makes your thoughts slow down. Or maybe they're just falling asleep. It's hard to tell anymore. In ancient Persia, fire temples weren't just places of worship. They were centers of cleansing rituals to keep not just the body, but the environment pure. Bathing in water was important. But bathing in scent, in smoke, in sacred flame, that was another level entirely. You sit at the edge of the room, near a carved wall where geometric stars have been etched into the plaster, possibly as old as your great-grandparents' regrets. A shallow dish near the door smolders with juniper wood, believed to cleanse the spirit without scalding the skin. You breathe it in, and your shoulders melt. Scholars still debate the exact ingredients used in Zoroastrian purification blends. Recipes were guarded, passed between priests like secret recipes for invisible peace. Some say the smoke could ward off sickness. Others just liked how it made their cloaks smell less like camel. Eventually, you step back out into the sun, which now hangs high overhead like a watchful, slightly judgmental eye. A boy walks past, holding a clay vessel wrapped in cloth. From the steam escaping its top, you suspect it contains perfume meant for ritual use, or possibly a lunch that got overly ambitious. You trail behind him until you reach a quiet plaza, filled with wind chimes made from broken ceramic pieces. They rattle softly in the breeze, and each one is painted with verses. One reads, "May your words be gentle, your presence scented, and your dreams not overdue." You sit again. The stone beneath you is warm. A breeze lifts the edge of your sleeve. You smell of rose, smoke, and maybe, just maybe, a little of the ancient fire. The plaza gives way to a long colonnade arched and sun-striped, with pale light slanting through latticed windows above. You drift along it, slowly, because nothing in this city demands urgency. Even the pigeons here seem to coo in a slower tempo. The scent shifts again, faint and slightly bitter. Astringent. Someone is distilling herbs nearby. You follow it past. A courtyard shaded by fig trees, where a small group of women sit stirring copper basins over flame. One fans the fire gently, the other peels what appears to be bitter orange rind into thin strips. Their pots are filled with thick syrups and delicate oils, cooling slowly beside trays of crushed seeds and soaked petals. One of them looks up and smiles without stopping her work. You ask nothing, and she answers nothing, but the warm, resinous smell speaks for her. She holds up a small cloth-wrapped cone. You nod. She places it in your hand like a blessing. This is where perfume begins, not in a shop, not in a scroll, but here, over fire and stone, with laughter, sweat, and centuries of trial and fragrant error. In ancient Persia, women often controlled the domestic art of scent-creating herbal mixtures, oils, and infusions, not only for hygiene or seduction, but for healing, ritual, and even grief. A scent for every sorrow, every celebration. A lesser-known fact: it wasn't uncommon to scent the walls of a home. Clay surfaces were brushed with mixtures of vinegar, oils, and powdered resin to hold fragrance longer. Imagine a living room that smelled faintly of saffron and lemon balm after a long day. Frankly, it's an upgrade from modern air fresheners, most of which smell like artificially confident fruit. Historians still debate whether these household scents were seen as functional, medicinal, or purely aesthetic. Probably all three. When you live in a world where a breeze might be your only air conditioning, you want that breeze to smell excellent. You press the warm cone to your nose, basil, rose, and something smoky. Not elegant, not sweet, but honest. An oddly familiar dot it smells, you decide, like an old story. You pass back into a narrower lane, where sunlight is filtered through curtains and balconies above. The architecture here leans in slightly, like neighbors sharing secrets. The walls seem to hum with heat and time. A small bathhouse comes into view. You almost walk past it. After all, today's story is about not bathing, but you step inside anyway. Curiosity is a gentle force, like gravity in soft shoes. Inside, the air is thick and fragrant, not with steam, but with cedar and herbs, steeping in clay jars. A woman sits by a long marble basin, adding dried thyme and rose petals into the water by handfuls. She hums a tune with no lyrics, and every so often sprinkles crushed fenugreek seeds over the tiles. You're not here for a bath, just a breath. So you inhale slowly and let the herbal air settle somewhere behind your eyes. Here's something curious. In times of drought or long travel, Persians would sometimes skip full baths for scented cloves. These were dampened with floral waters or vinegar infusions and gently pressed across the body. Think of it as the ancestor to the modern wet wipe, but classier. And probably poetic. The woman offers you a folded cloth from a copper bowl. You press it to your neck. The scent is floral, yes, but edged with something slightly bitter, like regret softened by routine. Scholars still wonder how widespread these cloth rituals were. Were they reserved for women and the sick, or used by travelers on caravan roads when no water could be spared? The records are scattered, faded, and like perfume, always a little elusive. You sit at the edge of the marble basin, where the water reflects light like broken glass. A few petals float across its surface, spinning slowly in lazy circles. Outside, a merchant's voice calls out in soft rhythm. He's not shouting, just offering scented vinegar through metaphor. Like rain in an empty hand, he says. For feet that wander too long, you smile. You're not sure what that means, but it feels appropriate. The cloth in your hand is nearly dry now, but the scent lingers on your neck, in your sleeve, maybe even behind your thoughts. The woman begins to hum again, and you rise, refreshed, not because you bathed, but because you remembered how to pause. The sun has dipped slightly westward now. not quite setting, but softer, slanting at a more forgiving angle. You wander back through the city's pulse at half speed, passing shadowy arches and market stalls slowly packing up their scented goods. The scent in the air now is more mixed, part crushed herbs, part evening firewood, and a whisper of fading jasmine. You pause near a school courtyard where a few children are still reciting verses aloud, supervised by an elderly man who appears more interested in his pipe than their pronunciation. The children's sandals thump against the worn earth as they run in circles after recitation, their tunics fluttering like old pages in a breeze. One of them carries a perfumed amulet around her neck, a tiny cloth pouch stuffed with crushed coriander and mint dot. Yes, that's a real thing. Fragrant charms were used not just for pleasant scent, but for protection against illness, evil, or especially awkward relatives. The Persians didn't necessarily believe perfume had magic, but they did not believe it either. Nearby, two women sit on a stone ledge stringing herbs into garlands. Lavender, bay, and something bright green you can't quite name. The bundles will be hung on doorways before dusk. You ask why. One woman shrugs and replies, because it pleases the air. That feels like enough explanation. Here's a lesser-known fact. Certain military leaders in ancient Persia were known to anoint their armor with perfume before battle. Not because it masked blood or sweat, though let's be honest, that didn't hurt, but because scent was seen as a mark of dignity, of identity. Imagine riding into war smelling like cinnamon and power. Now that's a mood. Historians still argue whether this practice was ceremonial or simply stylish. But inscriptions from Persepolis describe gifts of perfume from vassal states, meaning scent wasn't just local luxury. It was international diplomacy in a bottled dot. You watch as the herb garlands are lifted over a doorway. A child inside yawns. A cat follows suit. You decide it's time to keep drifting. You walk on. Evening draws itself across the city like a silken shawl. Long shadows stretch toward the courtyards, and torches begin to glow inside wall sconces. The lamps here are small, mostly clay, some copper, and many are scented. Not just lit, not just warm, but fragrant. You pass a doorway where a man carefully drops a few crushed cloves into his oil lamp, murmuring a prayer for peaceful dreams. Down the street, another woman is dipping wicks into wax thickened with dried orange peel. Her hands are steady. Her room smells like dusk in citrus form. You step into a public hall, a kind of gathering space, half tavern, half library. The cushions along the walls are low and faded, but welcoming. A servant passes you a small towel scented with saffron. Water, which you press to your face like a slow sigh. Conversations hum gently in the background, nothing dramatic. Just soft debates about trade, philosophy, and whether a fig counts as dessert. A storyteller at the far end of the hall begins to speak, his voice low and deliberate. His story? A romance about a girl who smelled so strongly of cinnamon that the wind fell in love with her and never left her tent. Unrealistic? Of course, but deeply fragrant? Absolutely. You sit near a column carved with old symbols, faded birds, fish, and swirling vines. There's a faint line of incense ash trickling down the groove. Someone nearby is rolling amber beads between their palms, releasing a resinous, honeyed scent every few seconds. It's like time has developed a smell. Here's something delightfully odd. In some ancient Persian homes, guests were greeted with perfume smoke before they even crossed the threshold. Doors would open, and out would waft sandalwood, as if the house itself were exhaling politely. Whether this was to impress, bless, or simply mask the family goat, scholars still wonder. You lean your head back, eyes half closed, and listen as the storyteller continues. And when the girl finally spoke, her breath smelled like cardamom and secrets. You exhale softly, not quite asleep, but the air seems to be breathing for you now. You step out of the hall and into the cooler breath of night. The sky above Persia is ink blue now, drawn with a steady hand, and the stars have arrived early, glittering like specks of powdered resin flung across velvet. The streets are quieter, just the occasional whisper of sandals, a gentle clink of pottery, and the far-off chime of a wind bell shifting on a balcony. You turn into an alley lit by a single oil lamp. The shadows stretch long and theatrical, but the warmth from the stone walls feels like a lingering memory of the sun. You walk past another doorway where someone inside is simmering something on a brazier. The scent reaches you slowly, sweet, earthy, and gently spicy. You suspect it's galangal root and tamarind, but it could just as easily be an old family recipe for good dreams. A cat appears beside you, utterly unbothered. It rubs against your sandal, then disappears through a crack in the wall like a puff of perfume with fur. Nearby, you come across a quiet rooftop terrace where 3 elders sit in a triangle, not speaking much. Each has a tiny ceramic bottle tucked beside them, some labeled, some not. They lean back against cushions, tilt their heads toward the stars, and every now and then dab a little oil onto their fingertips and press it gently to their temples. Like punctuation, like prayer, like calming punctuation. Here's a soft historical detail, many ancient Persians believed that scent, especially at night, helped ease the mind and prepare the soul for peaceful travel in dreams. A kind of aromatic ticket to a calmer subconscious. One of the elders waves you over, half asleep already. He holds out a small bottle and points to the moon. You take the bottle. You smell it. It smells like sleep and something older than that. Historians still debate whether moon rituals involved specific perfume blends. Some texts mention oil pressed from white poppy. Others speak of nighttime resins like labdanum or storax. The recipes, if they ever existed in full, have mostly dissolved like scent in wind. You sit with them for a while. Say nothing. Just breathe. Later, you're walking again, now beneath a woven canopy of grapevines strung between rooftops. The leaves rustle quietly above you, and every few steps you catch a glimpse of stars between the gaps. Somewhere below, a musician plays. A stringed instrument with just 3 notes, repeated softly, like an incantation for stillness. A few windows are still open. From them spill thin threads of conversation and the warm aroma of nighttime scents, cardamom, quince, cumin, and rose. One window reveals a family gathered around a tray, slowly peeling oranges and dipping the rinds into perfumed syrup. No one speaks loudly. No one rushes. It's the kind of quiet only earned at the end of long, fragrant days. You come to a small square where a fountain still gurgles lazily. The stone is cool now, and you trail your fingers through the water. Someone has floated a few petals on. The surface marigold, you think. Or maybe calendula, which the ancient Persians believed could soothe inflamed skin and restless thoughts. A young girl walks past, holding a clay lantern. Inside, the candle is surrounded by dried lavender and crushed lemon balm. She says nothing, just nods politely and continues down the path, leaving behind a scented trail of bedtime. Now, here's a curious one. In wealthier homes, pillows were sometimes stuffed with herbs and dried blossoms, not just for scent, but for what we might call emotional support. Chamomile for grief, sage for clarity, basil, oddly enough, for courage. Your modern pillow, to be honest, is falling a little short. Some scholars still argue about whether these were common practices or poetic exaggerations from courtly texts, but archaeological remains have uncovered sleeping platforms with fragrant residue, not enough to reconstruct a recipe, just enough to know that someone long ago cared how their dreams smelled. You find a low bench near the fountain and rest a moment. The wind picks up just slightly, bringing with it something floral, not too sweet, not too sharp, a scent that feels like the middle of a sigh. You're not asleep, not quite, but you are no longer entirely here. The sky has darkened fully now, deep and vast, speckled with stars that flicker like quiet thoughts. You rise from the bench by the fountain, stretch just a little, and wander onward, slowly, gently, as though even the stones beneath your feet deserve a good night's peace. You pass a small caravanserai, its doors still open to late travelers. A donkey rustles somewhere in the courtyard, and the smell of warm hay mingles with the sweeter scent of dried apricots and clove oil. A merchant sits nearby, gently brushing oil onto a strip of leather. Not to preserve it well, maybe that too, but more to soften its soul. You suspect. There's a momentary hush, the kind of silence that feels arranged. And then a woman steps out carrying a small bundle. Inside, you glimpse rolls of cloth and tiny bottles tucked between folds of what looks like embroidered cotton. She sees you and smiles briefly, then disappears into the night without a word. The bundle leaves behind a faint trail of sandalwood and fennel. Like a footprint made of perfumed dot, you follow the road that leads slightly uphill. toward a cluster of olive trees that whisper secrets when the breeze leans in. Here's something unusual. In some rural parts of ancient Persia, travelers would carry dried scent tablets made from powdered rose, myrtle, and starch. When mixed with a little water, they could be pressed onto the face or hands not to clean, but to revive. Like scented courage in portable form. Historians aren't certain how often these tablets were used or by whom. Some say they were mostly reserved for the upper class. Others argue that versions existed for common folk too, just with humbler ingredients. Either way, you now want one for your next meeting. You pause beneath an olive tree where someone has hung a tiny bag of herbs on a branch for protection, for a wish. You don't ask. You just sit there beside it for a while, breathing in the perfume of the earth after dark, a kind of fragrance only the night knows how to make. You're nearly at the edge of the city now, where walls thin out and fields begin. The horizon glows faintly with the memory of sunset, and crickets begin to take over the airwaves. Their rhythm is slow and hypnotic, a lullaby performed by nature without rehearsal. Ahead, you see a shepherd sitting cross-legged beside a low fire, surrounded by his sheep who seem entirely uninterested in your presence. The fire smells of pine branches and distant rain, a strange scent, but comforting. The shepherd nods and gestures to the ground beside him. You sit. He pours something warm into a small cup, perhaps milk, perhaps some ancient mixture of herbs and nostalgia. You sip. It tastes like bedtime. Next to the fire, a clay burner simmers with dried rue and caraway, believed to keep away both bad spirits and bothersome insects. The shepherd reaches into a pouch and tosses a pinch of something new into the flame. A spiral of lavender smoke rises, curling like a question no one plans to answer. Did you know some people believed that scent carried prayers faster? Not louder, not clearer, just faster. Like a perfume express service to the heavens, whether or not the heavens responded. Well, that part is still under review. In wealthier cities, people sometimes added perfume to the wick of their lamps. So the very act of lighting a flame released fragrance. Light became scent. Scent became light. And maybe that's why, here by the fire, everything feels a little softer around the edges. The shepherd pulls out a small cloth satchel and presses it into your hand. Inside, dried marjoram and mint. A token for safe travels, he says, or maybe just something to tuck into your sleeve for when the air stops smelling like this. You thank him without words and rise once more. The fields ahead wait in silence, and somewhere, faint on the wind, you smell rose again. You walk now in the softest part of the night, where silence isn't empty but full of stories and steps and long-faded perfume. The city lies behind. You, not entirely asleep but breathing slower, like a great beast that's finally curled up. You reach a hill overlooking the city's edge, where wind moves through tall grasses that shimmer like threads in a forgotten tapestry. The stars above feel close, almost low enough to brush your fingers across. Somewhere below, a dog barks once. Then nothing. You sit. Beside you is a weathered shrine, just a few stones arranged in a half circle, with remnants of old offerings tucked into crevices. Dried petals, ash, a broken clay bottle. Someone once came here to pray with scent in their hands. You press the satchel from the shepherd marjoram and mint to your nose. The smell has faded already, but not entirely. Like a memory too worn to be sharp, but too real to vanish. Here's something final for tonight. Some ancient texts claimed that the last thing a person should smell before sleep was familiar. A scent from home, a reminder of comfort. Because scent, they believed, tethered the soul in sleep and kept it from wandering too far. Historians still wonder whether that belief was spiritual, poetic, or just practical advice wrapped in metaphor. No one really knows. You lie back now, your body warm from walking, your breath slow. The wind carries the city's remaining smells, upward baked earth, faint rose water, a whisper of fig smoke. The world doesn't smell like perfume anymore. It just smells like night. The grass rustles gently. A breeze moves across your face like a soft hand. And for the first time all day, you don't need to follow anything. You're still. And that's enough. Let the sounds fade around you now. The gentle stir of trees in the breeze. The crackle of a forgotten hearth cooling in a quiet courtyard. The scent of saffron lingering on a windowsill. Somewhere behind your eyes, the city still breathes, slow and steady. Wrapped in the hush of old perfume and older dreams, your feet no longer carry you. Your thoughts are gentle passengers, unbuckled, unmapped. The stone beneath you is soft now, not cold. The night sky no longer watches, it simply holds. The world has no corners here. Everything rounds off into sleep. In the distance, the last lamp flickers out in a hallway of carved wood. Someone adjusts their blanket. Someone else whispers a final prayer into a pouch of herbs before placing it by their bed. No rush, no reason. Just the nightly customs of people who knew that rest-like scent deserves attention. The stars above shimmer softer, as if dimming for your benefit, and the breeze carries nothing now but silence, a warm silence, one that smells faintly of orange blossom and dust. Tonight there is no lesson left to learn, no path to follow. The story is told, and its breath lingers like the final note of a song hummed once gently into the folds of a linen pillow. So rest easy, you've wandered enough. The scent of sleep is already with you. Good night.